Welcome to the first. You have a story. If you look back on your life, you've done things for the first time that no one in your family, in your town, in the country has done. This is Dr. Sandi. You have unknowingly paved the way for others without knowing it or even acknowledging it. This is where you tell your story so that those who come after you can walk in your footsteps to build their own firsts. Hey everybody, welcome Alundas Havens. After getting kicked out of his home during high school, Alundas decided to join the United States Marine Corps to get some discipline back into his life. He got to a prestigious enlisted rank 6 position when he tore his cartilage and had to rethink his entire life. At 23, he used his Veterans Affairs loan to become the first in his family to get a house. While going through a tough transition from the military, he listened to an Underdog Empowerment podcast with Zachary Babock, and that changed his life. He decided to start a podcast and work for himself. That was another first in his family to become an entrepreneur. His Alpha Influence Media now helps people recalibrate their mindset when they want to make a change but don't know where. Now Alundas is back in college, getting ready to graduate, using his GI Bill, and thinking about getting a doctorate. If you want to reach out to Alundas, reach him on his LinkedIn at Alundas-Havens. You can also email him at alundas@thewinnersparadigm.xyz. Everybody, welcome Alundas. Good morning, everyone. Today I'm speaking to Alundas Havens, and Alundas is just going to tell me what he does and what we're doing today.
Absolutely. And thank you, Dr. Sandi, for allowing me to come on your podcast today. My name is Alundas Havens. I'm originally from Fresno, California, but I ended up about an hour north of San Diego in Marietta. So a little brief introduction on me. My parents separated when about 3 or 4 years old. From there, it was a lot of tough situations, chose size, went through that, right? So throughout my upbringing, I found out there was a lot of ideologies and patterns that didn't suit me. So from there, I started just challenging everything. And I was that annoying kid asking those questions. Why do we do that? Well, that doesn't make sense. You should follow your dreams. Well, why aren't you doing it? I was that kid because I wanted to know answers of how we can get to where we want to be, right?
Nice.
So a lot of things happen. Um, Good friends pass away and end up getting kicked out of my house senior year of high school. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do with my life?
You mean from your home house, your home, you're with your mom?
Yes.
Ah,
So it was one of those. At first, it was, what are you going to do? And I could have went to colleges, and from there I said, hey, I'm going to go to the Marine Corps, and that's how I'm going to be able to get the discipline that I need. That's going to help me. So best decision I ever made. I loved it. Wish I could have stayed in, but I tore the cartilage in my right knee, and then from there, was back at that position, to where it was even worse because I actually accomplished certain things and I got promoted really fast, prestigious role. So it was enlisted rank 4 and enlisted rank 6 position. So I was learning so much, becoming my own boss, to where it was, hey, I can do this. And then I get injured and it's stripping me of that. And it's like, hey, you're going to sit here. You're going to have a new boss now. They're going to micromanage you. So for me, it was
oh no.
learning. Yeah, it was learning all those things. And it was so frustrating because once you're at one place and then somebody tries to come in, hey, this is how you're going to do it. You need to give feedback. And it was just like, you go from A to Z, So from me, it was battling through all of that. In what was great as well, as you look at in when you're going through that growth, you figure out, hey, how are we going to make it? So from there, transitioning out of the military, and what's funny is, I just went on a Facebook group. I started listening to one of my favorite podcasts, Underdog Empowerment. They had a Facebook group. I joined it, joined their mastermind group that was $47 a month, because I needed help with podcasting and getting my message out there. So that's where I first started my podcast, The Winner's Paradigm. And that's where I talk to people, help them recalibrate their mindset so they can achieve what they want to. So a little bit on there real quick. is
And
this
was this targeted to people who came out of the military or just anyone?
This podcast is specifically tailored to anybody who's looking to make that change, but they don't know where. And that's why I say it's all about recalibrating that mindset, because sometimes we grow up, we think a certain way, we think things aren't achievable because of what people did around us, or what they say as well. Because even, for instance, I was starting my own business and had some family members. Why would you want to start a business?
I
That's too much.
know, I know. I think that's one of the key things that discourages entrepreneurs, especially if
Absolutely.
you don't come from a family of entrepreneurs, right? They want you to get a steady job, a steady paycheck. And why would you want to leave, getting a regular paycheck to go start your own thing?
Absolutely. And for me, it was that. And this is the funny part, is I had that mindset still. I had a good job. I was helping veterans at the time. And it was one thing where it was like, hey, I can do this, but there was going to be coming a time. So that happened to me. We ended up having, we have a 5-month old, and we had a childcare problem to where it cost way too much money, to where we were just losing money having a nanny full time. So I had to
Right.
take the days where we couldn't find one, and I had to watch my daughter. And I told the job, hey, this is what's going on. I'm making my sales calls through it. Only difference is when I do have that 30 minutes of no calls, I'm not going to make an extra call. I'm just going to focus on my child. They couldn't respect that, and I let them know, hey, this is what's going on right now. This is a corrective action. They said, oh, is your heart still in it? And from there, it struck me. I was, you know what, it's not.
Not.
So talk to my mentors. Hey, let's start a business. We're going to be helping podcasters increase their influence, increase their message. So that's all about alpha influence media, is really helping podcasters get their power back. Because I know a lot of times, as an entrepreneur, business owner, we have so many elements that we're working on for our business. We're training people that we don't really look at it sometimes. I know we're specific on who we bring on our podcast, but more importantly, saying, hey, how many podcasts am I getting out there, getting my message out? How many times am I going out, and finding the right shows I want to be at, so we either can bring us back more money or more followers, increase the downloads. So that's where we're all specifically focusing in on getting those podcasters to get their message out. And then from there, taking care of everything as in visuals, connecting them so they can just focus on what they're good at.
You know, that's interesting because I was just thinking about why I started my podcast, and it had nothing to do with money. But at some point, I started thinking, this should be monetized. This should
Absolutely.
have some kind of revenue coming in. I haven't reached a point where I'm taking action on making making that happen, but I've just started to get that mindset of, hey, this could be revenue generating. But I started it mainly because I realized there's so many people out there whose story just don't get told, right?
Absolutely.
And some of them don't even know they have a story. Like I called it the first because we start so many things in our own families, in our own circles, and being the first one doing it. And sometimes it's not even recognized. Sometimes we don't recognize it ourselves that we're paving the way for others to do this thing, and we don't get that recognition. And I wanted people to say, just the common ordinary guy, right? Like in my day, I'm doing a lot. I'm doing a lot for the next generation to come. We'll start doing this. I'm doing a lot for my family. And so that's why I started. So it's interesting to hear, the other side of the monetization of a podcast.
Absolutely. And I love the way you say that, looking at that other perspective and letting people know, hey, you do have that voice. And that's where I was at as well. It's funny, there, because I dropped my podcast a week before my daughter was born. And kind of the underlying premise of that was like, hey, I want to be the man I say I am and not continue to speak one way and not say it. So for me, I love training people and I love having those conversations, in at the same time, getting that constructive feedback. So I said, hey, a podcast would be exactly perfect for that. That way we can talk. And at the same time, if you don't know something, you get somebody who does know, hey, how did you break from, 6 figures to seven
Yes,
figures? Or how did you break to 6 figures initially? Because right now, I'm scaling my business, but I don't know. And now I have that outlet to ask those questions. So like you said, being the first, a lot of times is we do things and we just kind of keep pushing, pushing, pushing because that's what we're so used to do that we don't acknowledge it as well. So I loved how you said that.
Do you think that's a personality trait that people have of going out and being able to start new things on their own? Because not everybody does that. Not everybody's a doer.
I absolutely do believe to an extent that yes, it could be a personality trait as we're driven individuals, but at the same time, it could be people who just aren't happy with where they're at currently. And it's, hey, they get the job, they accomplish the task that they've been sought out to see, and then there's still something missing, or they're still like, hey, this isn't it. Or in my case, getting to the job, running into a problem, and then you're like, well, I know my value is, so that I'd say
But
it's
see, that's interesting because you knew what your value was, but a lot of people don't know what their value is. And
absolutely.
they stay in unhappy jobs forever, for years and years. And I
Mhm.
know, especially my parents' generation, where
Absolutely.
they just needed a paycheck, right? It was incumbent on them to bring in money and to keep a roof over your head and to put food in your mouth and just to provide the basic necessities that you need for your day to day. And so
Absolutely.
for them, it's frightening not to know where your next dollar is coming from.
That's a great point, and it's frightening. Period. When you do make that jump, before it's actually funny. Before I started the business, I had that thought. I was, hey, I'm gonna wait another 7 years. Why are you gonna wait 7 years? Well, I might want to get my MBA or my doctorate in between, or I might want to accomplish this. I want to have all the good experience, and then get aligned with my mentor that now we're partnering. And Zach told me, he said, nope, we're starting this now, and it was just having that conviction that it's going to work out. And it was looking at my team, looking at their strengths, what they've already accomplished. Yeah, it's a no brainer with their contact list, with their training with me. We can get to where we need to be. So I would say, it's yes, it's definitely frightening figuring out where that next dollar is going to come from. But when you align yourself with those right people that are going to help you, walk you through it, be there, that's where you're going to be able to grow. Is you're going to be like, what, I can do this. I can lean on my team if I don't know something. So at the same time, a great lesson I just learned from that was I created an offer. I went in specifically on what I wanted to get done, and then I actually created everything for one of my unique scenarios. And it was one where it was like, okay, that's cool. You did it this way, but we need to redo everything because it's not aligning to who we are as our purpose. We're looking at one specific client and tailoring it down to them. So that's where I had to go back to the drawing board. And it was one of those times where you either get upset and you're like, this isn't for me, or you
Yeah.
own up to it. So for me, it was, hey, I start laughing about it, have a little bit of that humility, and I said, hey, I did do this wrong. Let me figure out how I did it right. So you ask those questions, and that's the toughest things to do as well.
Yeah. So let me ask you about your buying a house at 23. That's very interesting to me. I love real estate. And at 23, I was thinking about doing real estate, but I wasn't doing real estate quite the way you are. So tell me
Right.
about that.
Absolutely. So that was another terrifying process. The reason why is me and my wife were going through a lot during that, and we actually took a couple breaks buying a house. So I believe in total it was about 7 or 8 months that it took to get a house, from all of our offers getting rejected and going through that. And then in between, we had a miscarriage. So it was kind of one of those where definitely crushed our soul because my wife, we're two different personalities, and that's why we work so good together.
Yeah.
Is when we're going through something, one of us shuts off and one of them keeps going. Me, I just keep pushing, pushing, pushing because that's all I know how to do, to where I don't acknowledge that. So it was the first time where I was like, all right, I don't feel okay. I know she's not. I need to get better so I can help her. And that was one of the things we did. So it was that stalled us. And then from there, um, we ended up getting pregnant again before we had our daughter. And it was, hey, what do we want to do? At the time, we had 3 dogs and we were in a condo. And it was, yeah, we don't want to be in this 2 bedroom condo. And the worst part about that condo is so many problems. They had like moldy,
Oh, no. Oh,
excuse
no.
me, refrigerator line broke, and then it busted open all over the floor. So it made
Uh,
everything moldy, rotting, smelling. They stripped it out, and then it took them 3 months to fix the flooring, the walls. It,
yeah.
it was a nightmare. And then they also had like some other construction in this condo multiple times, and it was one where it was just super inconvenient. And we knew, hey, that's not where we want to be. So we started looking at houses. In good thing, we started with credit younger, so we were able to have it because that was a big one.
Nice.
Um, and also I used the VA loan, so that was good. But bad
I
thing
was
I'd
going to
say,
ask you that if you used your VA loan.
yeah. So bad thing I would say there. We bought a house out of Marietta. First, we're thinking about San Diego. San Diego, you're gonna pay 700,000, and then the the realtor wanted us to make blind offers, and he said, "Hey, 700,000 for this house." We're like, "Oh, this is a beautiful house. Yeah, let's do a blind offer." So we drive by it. This was in the hood, and we're like, "Yeah, we're not going to be living in the hood like this, paying 700,000 for a house." It was one of those like, "Hey, you leave one situation to go to the same
To go to
situation."
another, yeah.
Exactly. So from there, we end up moving about an hour away. We look at it, find the house we want, and then we wrote a contingency in, and it was we would pay up to $15,000 more because if it appraised higher than that or lower than that, then we would have to pay the 15,000 out of pocket.
Right.
Which originally they wanted to go higher than that. They wanted to go 20 or 30, and we were like, no, we're not going to spend all of our reserves. And then luckily the house came about 40 over, so we didn't have to pay anything from there. And then we ended up getting another loan officer that allowed us to roll the closing costs in. So it was a very rare case, but it was awesome. Those 7 months were rough, and then we found the home we wanted, building on it, and now we're able to slowly do that. And then again, um, be able to have those benefits of, having the backyard for the dogs,
Right.
taking care
Right.
of the baby. Now it's a 2-story home, so we can put her upstairs and she's asleep in her room, and then we can be out doing stuff downstairs. So it's no longer, hey, we have to be quiet, shut the house down. It's definitely helped us out so much to be able to have our space, because that was one thing, in the condo is you get tired of each other sometimes because you just open a door, you guys are right there.
Exactly. Exactly. But what's good about the military too is that it gives you so many opportunities to create a life after the military, right? Because a VA loan is such a great thing. And we don't really think about that. Like when you're considering going into the army, I don't think people say, oh, I'm going to get this great benefit of getting a house. My husband's a vet too.
That is
So I
awesome.
know he utilizes all his benefits as much as he can. And I keep thinking, oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know, you know, every time something comes up, I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. So military is a good place for people who either don't know what they want to do and want to learn a skill while they're in there. I never push it enough. I really don't.
Absolutely. And I'd say for me, coming how I did and the way I was thinking, and then just, everything there, getting kicked out the home, the military allowed me to figure out, what I was going to be, number one, and two, take action. So my second year, and I was upset because I wanted to start college as soon as possible. Second year, right when I could start college classes. So by the time I got out, I'm going to be about 2 years in July. In August, I had my last class, finished up my bachelor's in business management. So it's one of those where it was, hey, setting myself up for success. And if you take the action, you find the answers, you talk to people, then you can definitely have those resources. So that's one of my main goals as well. I like to help veterans and let them know, like, hey, you can accomplish this. It's tough, but you can put the work in, because a lot of times they have the information there, but people don't realize it. You go through the checking out process. Your mind's already, okay, what am I doing? In my case, um, when I got out, I found out I had 2 weeks before I had to get out. So I'm sending my resume to jobs, and then going through the tough part, how much experience you have. I have 6 years. And like, oh, so you've been selling? And I'm like, yes. Like before I got in the Marine Corps, I would sell with my recruiter. We would call people, recruit them
Yes,
all day, because when I got kicked out of my house, I needed somewhere to go, and I didn't want to be at my friend's couch all day. So I'd go with the recruiter. We'd go to the mall. He'd buy me lunch, and me and him built a good relationship, and then went in, and that's where I excelled from there. So it was awesome being able to share that with people and say, hey, all these things can happen. You just have to align them right. You have to do a little bit of back end work, and then you can be able to have VA loan per se, and use that for your home, use your GI
And even
benefits,
for
be like,
for
hey,
the education part, in my doctoral class, there were quite a few vets, and
absolutely.
they're like, "Well, the Army pays for it." I'm
Uh,
like, "What? They're paying for a doctorate? I did not know they would do that."
that's what I'm trying to do in the future is figure out how I'm going to do that. I believe there's a couple programs that do it. So that's where I'm gonna in the future after the business is going, I'm gonna either get my MBA or doctorate. I have a couple good friends that are doctors, and every single time I talk to them, they're, "Oh, you're gonna be one of us," and it's just one of those.
It,
Absolutely, in the
there's no
future.
reason not to be. There
Exactly,
is no reason not to be because the opportunities there. There's so much going on in that field right now in research. Everything needs research. So once you learn how to do that, I'm telling you, I paid for mine. I wasn't in the military, so I had to pay.
and
And
that's
I'm sitting
awesome.
there going, you guys are not paying for this? But you paid in another way, though.
Oh,
You paid with your service.
absolutely, and I'd say that's the best part, and that's what makes me laugh about it. Is now looking at all those small lessons, looking how much we grew. I actually had with one of my partners, Tim, yesterday. We had a conversation, and it was about if you serve your country, you should drink. And it was one where it was like, you know what? I used to really believe that, but once I got in, and everybody's young, they're from everywhere, all over the country, so you can understand. Certain people are gonna have strong personality types,
Right.
and it was yeah, that's probably why it's a certain way. And it was one of those looking at it and it was like, hey, yeah, you endured this, but at the same time, it was all for a reason and it was worth it in the end. But at the time, what you're going through, it's just different. Like I was on deployment and they could mess with your sleep, and it's you work 16 to 18 hours. Now they're messing with your sleep. So I was not the nicest person. And I'm really glad that happened because I was able to get that out at 19, 20. So now as a
Right.
business owner, I know how to talk to people. And there's not anything stress wise that could really get me to be screaming at people anymore because that's not what I accept.
Right.
That's what I worked on myself. Marine Corps, I was with people that were old school mentality. So they would just start screaming. I'm good at that because my parents always yelled at me. So I would just stand there and then, okay. And one of my bosses, she loved to yell at me after, do you want to go get some ice cream? And it was, having that humility, moving on from it. But I'm really
That's
glad
the
that I did.
that's a typical thing they show about the military, right? Is the
Absolutely.
sergeant going, that
It's
scares you. I don't know. It scares me for people to be actually yelling back, and I don't have the personality to stand there and not yell back.
absolutely, and I ran into a couple situations that I did, So I'm blessed that nothing crazy happened. I had one where it was actually on deployment as well, and it was one of my counterparts. He was supposed to be in charge of me, but I ended up being in charge of him. And love this man to death. He's sweet soul, but the problem with him is he learned everything wrong, but he couldn't acknowledge that. And our boss wasn't the greatest at showing you things. She would be like, "Oh, look it up." So you're over here looking in an order, looking in a law per se, and you're trying to find something. You're Control F, and you're reading it 4 or 5 hours sometimes trying to figure out the answer, and then
Right.
in turn you're on the wrong thing. And it was one where like they would guide you but not guide you completely. So with him is he learned everything wrong, um and from there it was me helping him out, but I didn't realize it at the same time because all it was is like he keeps messing up, you need to fix it, it's your fault. And I'm like, well, he's in charge of me. So it's like both pointing fingers, and then we get in
Right.
a heated engagement one day, and we really figure it out. It's, hey, she's testing us to this point, and two, we just have to help him do it the right way. And it was not that it's the right way, it's that's the way she wants it. And that was it, his perspective of, hey,
But that's all
you know how to do
management skills, right? You're learning
exactly.
management skills, you're learning leadership. There's so much that you learn that you can transfer to when you get out of the military.
Oh, 100%. And I'd say that was the biggest culture shock when I got out the military. I was 22. And when I would talk to people, they would say, how old are you? 26, 27? I'm like, no, I'm 22. And then I was working at a mortgage brokerage, or excuse me, first I did sales in the home. It was selling AC. So it was, going home to home. And that was
Right.
difficult because I was young and people would always pick that up. And I didn't have a rebuttal for it of, oh, you're young.
Exactly.
And I was like, that's nothing that they can argue. So I worked with people who were 50, 60. So it was definitely different perspective on the way that they spoke and they sold. And then I transitioned to a mortgage brokerage. And like I said, people thought I was 27, 28. I'm with these other 22-year-olds. And that's where I start bumping heads with people because the way we perceive things was totally different. I went to the
Right.
military. Everything that I had up to that point, since turning 18, is I made it for myself. So there was no mom and dad guiding me. They helped me a little bit, but as in, the monetary value is, hey, they showed their support, but it was all me. If things weren't going to happen, it was me. I put the food on the table, and it was hanging out with these people that are still, on mommy and daddy's couch, and oh, my parents did this or grew up at a different upbringing. And then they're arguing with me because they're saying, oh, college is this. And I'm like, yeah, college is great, but it's not for all people. And I'm like, in my case, I'm working the whole time. I've been doing it. I have a side hustle the whole time. So when we talk about our college experiences, I totally understand from both extremes because I know when you don't get sleep. I know when you're writing a paper
Right.
and you got the business to do. I know when, I started a podcast and it's like I'm freaking out. And then at the same time, I have a family in figure out that, hey, I need to just cut things sometimes and put that time for my family. So these are all good lessons that I learned early on, but it was, trying to translate that with other people, articulate it. And certain people with me, just kept being combative. And it was like really looking at it. It's like, hey, they don't understand where you're coming from. You can tell them as much as you want, you can prove it, but until they have that happen to them or they acknowledge it, then it's a different conversation. So that was
Do
where
you
I,
do you think
I changed that narrative.
you inspired your friends to like go buy a house, and did they look at you and say, "Hey, Alundas can do this. Maybe I can go do it too," or come to you to learn how to do that? Did your friends and family look at you as a leader in that?
Absolutely. And that was one of the, most heartfelt moments, I should say. Definitely getting out was a couple Marines that I was close to, and then some that I talked to every so often. And I was that one, I'm an introvert at heart, but I'm an extrovert, around people. If it's
Yes.
really up to me, I can just read a book and I'll just stick to myself. And I'm cool with that. But if it's, engaging with other people, yeah, we can do it. But I would love to stick by myself. So it was like I would always walk into shops and Marine Corps. One cool thing about it is they're super big on customs and courtesy. So if you walk in any room, hi, shake everybody's hand type deal. And it was that, but it built so more because you're starting to build relationships. I'm always smiling. People pick up on that. So I had a Marine ran in through tough times, and one day we talked for 3 hours, and it was kind of awesome. Where we were just talking. He's like, I feel like this really resonates with me because right now I'm trying to talk to people and no one's there for me, or they don't understand where I'm coming from. They're saying you should get a stable job, and he's like, I don't want a stable job. I want a business. I want these things in life that
Right.
haven't came before, and right now I'm having that feeling where I don't know if I can do it because I've never done it before. And it was one of those
Right.
cool things where multiple different people I can say, hey, you can definitely do it. Let's break it down to the basics. What are we doing today to change it? What are your daily habits? And it's one of those, where you start questioning people on those small things, and they're like, well, does this really matter? And you're like, absolutely it does. And they're like, why? I'm like, perfect example. I have extreme joint pain, shoulders, hips, knees, elbows. So I'm like, every single day I'm left with the decision. I either keep laying in bed feeling terrible, or I get up and make the day happen. And I'm like, I for the most part try to jump out of bed, but there are those days, where I sleep with a heated blanket and then I have a weighted blanket as well. And there's those days where I'm there and I'm like, I can't get up. Well, let me get this workout in later. Let me focus this morning in on reading, on doing something.
Correct.
And it's, I didn't follow the daily practice, but I made sure that I have a contingency that's going to keep me regulated and able to optimize that day, and work to the best of my ability. So it's kind of helping people and showing them, hey, it's small micro things you can do. It's the way you do that. It's the way you perceive things. If you're going to think about things negatively, negative thoughts are going to come around those good people. You're going to be able to do what you want to do. But if you're with people that don't know where they're going or just hanging out of the moment, then that's probably not the best case for you.
Yeah, I totally, Totally understand that. I mean, you had the foresight to even start getting your credit in fact before, buying a house, which is unusual for a young person. They usually go wild with the credit card or buy. Credit is not something that they think about at
So
that age.
So for me, I didn't have any credit, and then my grandfather was always the one that came in and cleared things up about getting just everything in my life. Problems that happened with my dad, he'd be there, Superman, and he'd be taking care of me. And he was actually going to help buy me a car, and it was, hey, I'll give you $4,500 if you find this. And it was before deployed, and it was looking at it, and it was like, all right, and he was like, hey, we should get a car that's about 20,000. I'll put 4,500 down. I'll help you make monthly payments. I'm like, well, I don't want
Right.
to pay 20,000 because at that time, $20,000 is a
It's
lot of
a
money to
lot
me.
of money.
So I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing 20,000. I'm not paying for this for 6 years. I'll just get a little beater car. He's like, well, you don't know how to work on cars. Well, I
Right.
can find someone that does and can work on this Honda for cheap. So I was gonna get a 2006 Honda, little beat down, $6,500. I go apply for a credit card. At that time, I'm 19 years old, and they said, or excuse me, applied for the loan, 16.9% APR. You know what? I don't think I want this car after all. So it was, hey, let's work on it. And then
All of a sudden, it doesn't look so good when you got to pay up a whole lot of money.
exactly. So from there it was talking to people, and they were like, hey, best way to build up your credit, just use it for monthly expenses. So that's where I was able to, put groceries on there, put my phone bill, and then just pay it off every single month. I was gone for 7 months, but really didn't do anything for 9, because prior to that, I was making sure that I wasn't spending it. So that's where I was just building it up. And then when I went back to get a car, I actually signed for 3%, and then they called me back, hey, no one accepted that. You need to sign for 7.9. So it was like learning with credit. Hey, I can do this. And then I waited a year, refinanced my car, got that to bring that monthly payment down. So
But
now I had
even
a little more money.
the discipline of waiting,
Mhm.
right? That's a discipline to not just jump out and get the first thing that you see or that you want, but it's a very difficult discipline to learn, to wait, to save, to not spend the money, as soon as you see the little shiny object that you
Absolutely.
want to get. And so, yeah, that's a lot of discipline. Kudos to you.
Thank you. And there too, even when I did get the car, it was another, paradigm of going through it where it was, I'm paying $300 a month for this car. And it was like one where I was like, I would never pay that, but I could afford it, and it was, hey, structure things a little bit differently. For that year, it was tough, but I made it out the year. Now I'm paying $195 versus 306. So it's a totally different feel. I got $100 extra to do a month, invest it, do whatever you want with it. And
Right.
that was one for me. It was like, hey, it's a growing process. You're not going to get there just tomorrow. And I think that's a lot of times what people don't understand.
My first car story is hilarious. I got a hoopty for my first car
Uh,
because I promised myself I was gonna get my car when I turned 21.
mhm.
And for me, it was freedom, right? A car
Yeah,
is freedom. I could go where I want when I want. And so I focused on just getting a car. And
absolutely.
I went I went out and got this car. I'm in New York, and I bought the car in New Jersey because it was much, much cheaper at the time.
Uh-huh.
And the car broke down on the highway coming home. And it was pouring rain. And I had to stop, try to do this thing. I finally got it to Brooklyn, and then it couldn't move out the driveway. But that was a big lesson. But once it was fixed, I had a car, and it was a used car. I don't know how many hands. I can't even say second hand. It might have been third or fourth. And this car couldn't go up a hill. I couldn't drive over a bridge. It would just cut out once you start to go. But it's a start, and you learn a lot from those kind of mistakes, what not to do.
Absolutely.
And you just have to be willing to accept that it's a mistake and learn from it and move on.
But I'd say at the same time, you understand the value now of having a car like that.
Oh, yeah.
versus going out and getting it. For instance, one of my family members, and this is where, sometimes the way we think is good intent, but the way we project it's differently. So for me, it was one of our family members. He was lent a car, and then from there, what he did was they want to go buy a car. So I actually talked with his dad, and we had a game plan of what we're going to do for him. We're going to teach him money. We're going to do all these things.
Right.
And then comes out that he buys a 2021 car, and I'm like, here we go again, and I start getting a little upset, and they're like, why? And I'm like, because now that he got a new car, it's going to be more money, and
Exactly.
paying $450 a month. And I'm like, how about next week he's going to complain about living there? So it was like one of those things where I was like, hey, bro, this is why we try to talk to you and say, hey, don't spend too much on a car, because you're going to be complaining about where you're living. How are you going to pay with $200 extra, $400 extra a week to try to go get a place where you know how expensive it is? Well, I'll just make more money. And it was one where it was like, okay, well, you're in the position to. And it was one where it was like, hey, we got to teach people better and
Yes.
walk them through those things versus like letting them do these things. And obviously, yes, people are going to learn on their own. But in my case, I was upset because I was like, hey, I wanted to teach him the small things and teach him how to work, make his money work for him. And hey, sometimes people aren't going to have that, but that's okay. At least we did our part trying to educate them, let them know, hey, this is what you can do to better your situation.
And finance is a big thing to learn, right?
Absolutely.
Whether it's you learning it or teaching it to someone else. Because when I got my hoopty car, I just remembered, like my grandfather always say, you know, a car is a depreciating asset. And
Right.
at the time, like, what does that mean? And he's like, the minute you drive it off the lot, you're losing money. Like the minute you take it and leave where you're going, I'm like, but people pay like $20,000 for a car. And he's like, yes, and tomorrow it's only worth 10 or, 9. And so I had that in my head when I was buying my hoopty. So I'm still not completely there of splurging on depreciating assets, but
Right.
I'm a little bit better. I'll get a new car, but I make sure that, the price is right and I look at the manufacturer tag.
Exactly. See, I was like that as well. In when I worked at the mortgage brokerage, I ran into a situation like that. So I have a Kia, and someone was making fun of me for it. Why do you have a Kia? Honestly, I was going to get a Honda, and then I seen a Kia for cheaper, so I bought the Kia. And then
And I
he's
got you
like,
there.
exactly. And he goes, well, why don't you have a Mercedes? If you don't have a Mercedes, you're broke. Well, I don't need a Mercedes. Why do I want a Mercedes when I can't pay for it to get fixed? Like, well, you can get a cheap mechanic. I'm like, well, keyword cheap there. You're talking about the value. Obviously, he's not doing something great. If it keeps
That's
breaking down, you have to go to a cheap mechanic to fix
funny.
it.
I thought if you had a Mercedes, you were broke because you put all your money into the car. And then
Exactly.
I went to California very young and I saw all these young people with Mercedes. And then at night at the beach, they would all park and sleep in their cars because they spent all their money on a car. They didn't even have a place to sleep. They couldn't
Exactly.
afford rent because they were paying, I don't know how much for this car. And so it's all about, you know, presentation, I guess, what people see and what you want people to see. And all they see is, oh, Alundas is driving around in a Mercedes. He must have a lot of money. Well, Alundas is sleeping in the Mercedes at night. That doesn't mean he has money.
Exactly. So I promised myself that I would never get in that situation. And then when I found out like the certain weight limits on what you can write off for your business, I said, you know what, I might get that luxury car a lot sooner and just write it off as a tax expense. And that's the only time you're gonna see, oh, you're like, oh, you got a new car. I'm like, yeah, I wrote it off. And that's gonna be the way, I perceived it was, hey,
Yeah,
it's worth that investment versus, going and making that decision. In my case, my dad had the cool cars, so it was always being in the Corvette, and I had a little bit of that. So it was like I didn't want it for myself per se, because I knew at the time, like, I don't need that. I'm not in that position to
right.
have this car, to pay the extra money on gas. Yeah, it's awesome. It brings class. People like it, but at the same time, you got to do what's affordable for you, what you can do. And at that
Absolutely.
time, I was driving six hours away every weekend to go home and see my family every weekend from being on base in San Diego and then traveling back Saturday, Sunday night. So it was one of those where, hey, this car's more convenient. It's good on gas. It's going to allow me to get to point A and point B. I'm not going to have any problems. I got lucky with the mileage. It was about 29,000. So I was able to use it. It was a fairly new car, In certain cases, I think that's where people think their wants and desires, as they see
Yes.
the wrong things or people flex it. And I got to be that one too. You can be that one, but you're going to pay the price for that. And that's what it was, working with those guys. Again, they made a lot more money. So it was a different conversation where they're like, well, just make more money. And that's a great point. You can always make more money and you can achieve it. But it was, funny having those conversations where someone's saying that you don't have the Mercedes. And I'm just like, it sets a bad image because you're going to have that one kid that gets out of college. I'm going to buy that. That's my dream car. And
Yes.
then they're like,
Yes.
oh.
Yeah, definitely. So, Alundas, you've done a lot for your age. What are some of the downsides of kind of being the leader and leading the way in the things that you do?
So I would say your tunnel vision. And the reason why is you have so much to accomplish. You're going to come down to a point where you have to filter out who you surround yourself with. And that's going to be tough, because you may be close with certain family members, but they're not fitting your vision on where you want to be. And let's say, you're having those conversations with them and it's going a different way. Well, you shouldn't do that because you shouldn't start a business because you should be secure. And those are the things you don't want to hear, when you're on that path, because you're going to start doubting yourself in that. So sometimes, and in my case, I did this exceptionally, was you get that tunnel vision and you look at it and you're like, hey, I'm doing this. And it's not that you don't like people, you don't like engaging with them. You're just working on it, and everything you're doing every single day, it's structuring to meet that goal. So when people see it and they're like, well, you don't want to spend time with us. No, you know why? And it goes down to that is, hey, Saturdays, I'm writing papers. I'm writing 5, 6, 10 pages, and I have to
Yes.
do it all at once because during the week I can't, and it's, oh, well, you don't talk to us as much. Yeah, I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I hit the gym before my daughter gets up. I'm up until 9 p.m. helping my wife. And then from there, 9 to 11, I'm also working on writing papers or doing anything else for the business.
Right.
So it's one of those where I'm already tired and that, I see your message. I can't respond to it all the time. Now I try to do the best I can, but it's, putting that mission, putting your family first. And for me, it's one of those where you keep pushing. You got to realize to take a break too, and spend time with those you love. In my case, was working, trying to provide, and then realizing, what, I'm not giving my wife the time she needs. At that time, the baby, I made it a strong point, before she got here. Hey, I'm going to be there every single day because I want to help. So that's where I started changing it because I knew before what I was doing wasn't working. At the time, it was just me and the wife. So she allowed it. And then once the baby came along, I said, that's not going to happen at all. Shut things down, shut the business down for the day. It can get done tomorrow. And that's where I start focusing more on, what's important.
No, perfect, perfect. So what's next for you, Alundas? Where are you
Absolutely.
going from here?
Thank you. So next is we're going to start an Alpha Influence Media podcast, where we're going to actually bring influencers on and show people, hey, this is how you monetize your podcast. This is how you can increase the downloads.
Oh,
Um,
maybe I could join you. Maybe you, now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I'll just hop on your stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. We can definitely have you on there, and that's the goal: is to be able to show people, hey, how did you get your following? How did you do it? Whether you paid or not, and then from there, when you're ready to make that jump and get connected, aligned with the right people, then you can be able to afford it. We can get you set with us moving forward and get you, connected either with guests who align perfectly with you, or if you wanted, the celebrity package and be able to get these high names on your podcast, increasing the traffic, we can do that. So that's the first, starting the podcast, boosting up my brand of Alpha Influence Media. And then in the future, we're going to start investing into real estate again, buying some properties, renting out some
Yes.
cars, because that's also what I found out is I have a barber and he has 2 luxury cars, but he rents them out. And he's like, honestly, these cars make me money. He's like, I make 3,000 extra off of them a month. And he's like, now I can
That's
do
a
whatever I want with
great
it.
idea. I had
Yeah.
not even thought about that. Oh my goodness, that's an amazing idea.
Yeah, so I thought that too. As I was like, and I want to rent these cars out because then you can have that luxury car for the one day
Right.
and do whatever you want. But at the same time, it's a depreciating asset that's making you money. And at that time, that's all you need is something
Yeah.
else to get you to get that foot ahead, and gain that momentum.
That's fantastic. Anything else you want to tell our audience?
That is it. You can guys follow me on the Winners Paradigm podcast and then Alpha Influence Media. So I'll put that email in there. And if you're ready to make that jump, get aligned with those perfect people to be on your podcast, to share your message, just message me. We'll give you the link in the bio. You'll have my email. You'll have where to contact me. And from there, you guys can just let me know, hey, I'm interested in boosting my brand up, getting me to be able to be connected with the right people and to be aligned. We can definitely connect you too.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on today. And I know we'll see each other again because I'm definitely going to hook up your podcast.
Absolutely, Dr. Sandi. And thank you again. It was an honor to be able to speak with you. And I can't wait to be able to interview you on the new podcast and be able to get it going from there.
All right. We've been talking to Alundas Havens today, and he is now with Alpha Influence Media. And we will see more of Alundas in the future. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Have a great day. This is Dr. Sandi. Thank you so much for sharing your journey on the first, where no two stories are alike, even if the circumstances are similar. Let this discussion serve as inspiration for others to show what's possible, and more importantly, to produce seconds and thirds.